Hey guys, my name is Kris. I work in Larian, and I'm here to talk about how I stumbled my way into the game of the year. Yeah, let's get started. So, who am I? My name is Kris Bongo. I am a cinematic artist at Larian Studios. I've been one for 4.5 years now, and I work on Baldur's Gate 3. Anyone here know or play Baldur's Gate 3? Show of hands. Anyone? Yeah, fair. Okay, yeah, a lot of people. Cool. Nice. So this was actually my first project. Just straight out of college, came into the game industry with Baldur's Gate 3 as the first game that I worked on. And I graduated TU Dublin as also a game design alumni, class of 2019. So yeah, the same course that you guys are doing, that's pretty cool. I like that. In my time, in my 4.5 years of working in Baldur's Gate 3, I've created over 140 scenes and consulted in some of the work that's all being done, such as uh, multicams and other tool sets that require cinematic input. Because the writers don't really know how cine works, so some of us have to go in there and actually teach them or like show them how it's done. But some of you guys might know maybe like multicam cinematics, so how you go to multiple camps in the game and the same kind of cinematics play regardless of the location. I was involved in the making of that. So yeah, because that wasn't in early access. If any of y'all played that. So before I go in, I'm gonna show you guys my city test from what I did in 2019. So this is back when I was still in school, in college. This is my last year of game design, and this is the city test that I did for Larian that got me into the thing. And then after that, I'm gonna show you a show reel of, I guess, how far I've come since then. So I'll just let it rip. I don't know if there's sound in it. It's very low. Oh, there we go. I don't know if any of you guys have recognized the voice lines, but this is VO from DOS 2. Why? Why did you and Lucy reach the deadline? Why didn't you wait? I was almost there. Why? The same reason we did everything. Protect morale. The price for Rivermon against just one portion. Any dividers do the same, and saving everything. His cloud, my father picked you. His best right-hand man. He knew you would make it. And he also, that if he told you the truth, you would falter. He knew you well. He knew you'd have to be tricked. But I'm his son. I can be trusted to the end, and I will take any actions necessary for the good of all. Nothing can stop you. Not even death. Death stops everyone eventually. You rose from the dead once. You won't rise this time. For you, I can stop. For you, I can trust. So that was a cinematic test that I did for Larian. That was all done in Unity. Larian provided assets for us to work with, the VO, the character models, and some animations. The face effects, the mouth rigging and all that weren't in, but we didn't have to worry about that anyway. And I spent godly amounts of hours, or ungodly amounts of hours, in Mixamo just looking for animations to tie together. I know you guys have experienced the same thing, but Mixamo is a godsend. So with that, the not play it again. The next one is my show reel. So after 4.5 years of Larian, I have made some cinematics, and maybe some of you guys might recognize some of these, but I'll let it play it out. So you can see the progression. Sorry, just real quick. Spoilers ahead. If anyone has not played the game, look away for the next 2 minutes and 17 seconds. That's not the slide. So yeah, audio was a bit weird, but that was my work in Baldur's Gate 3. Of course, some of the just the highlights of all that kind of thing. And now that I've established that I'm not just a random guy off the internet, I'll move on to the next slide. So, my journey. Where did I start from? How did I go? And where am I now? So, in secondary school, I always had interest in games and art. I was never really a plus student or anything. I was your average C student. My favorite subjects were geography and art, but I only got a C and a B in them respectively. So I wasn't the best in school, but I did have a passion for like anything games or creative related. So when I wanted to be involved in games somehow when growing up in my career. And secondary me, teenager me, wanted to be an esports athlete. Back in its infancy, I wanted to be this guy. Uh, uh, as you can see, that didn't really pan out too well. But I did see um, a poster when I was walking down the hallways of my school of the Minecraft Steve, which on it as well had like game design, DIT, come join, make games and all that kind of stuff. I didn't know game design was a thing back then. Like I didn't know you could go to school to create games, and I didn't really consider making games in the first place. But when I saw this, I was like, yeah, I'll put it up on my CAO and we'll see what happens. And I did. It was the only, out of the list of all my selections in CAO, it was the only course that got back to me. And well, I guess it's a good thing. In university, of course, I did game design like you guys. I created some games like you may be recognized, which are Pop Balloon and Cloud Trail Islands. These two, respectively. Um, we got a lot of time to work on these. These were Cloud Trail Islands was our big final year project, and Pop Balloon was our education project. But we had a lot of time to work on them, and we gained a lot of experience working on them as well, working in a team, creating hundreds of assets that I don't want to subject myself to anymore. And also entered some competitions to see where we're at and gauge our quality of work, I guess. And it was really fun. We went over in, I think it was Tipperary, over in GameSpot. And yeah, we ended up winning some awards, so that was cool. Yeah, that's a team. I don't know if some of you may recognize the girl that Kate. She did a talk here last year about her experiences in the industry. She was working in Vela and also in Sea of Thieves over in Rare and all that. And she was also the producer for our team, which was cool because she saved our butt a lot of times when a lot of us would either not do the work or, I guess, do too much work. She would just kind of get us in line. Having a good producer is very, very good. So, how did I get into Larian? How did I get into the game industry? It's, first of all, I want to say it's very hard to get into the game industry, but I don't want that to discourage you guys. So hopefully this talk will kind of lift up your spirits if you get like rejected and all that kind of stuff. It's all good. It's part of the process. So I started off in Touch Fest. This was during my third year. I think it was a summer internship for 3 months. I got in through my friend Kate actually, and I did quality assurance for a couple months there. And yeah, well, quality assurance is a thing. It wasn't for me. It didn't feel very fulfilling. I kind of went in and did quality assurance and game testing and all that kind of stuff for children's games, educational games, apps that required you to read the same page 50 times in 8 hours. It wasn't fun. But could be for some people. It all depends on the person. But for me, I wanted something else. I was very creative. I was very artistically driven. And so I wanted that. So my second gig in the game industry is Larian. So the process for this one, I started out sending the application. They did a talk here, not here, in the Danger Street campus back when TU Dublin was still called DIT. And they did a cinematic talk involving, what the process was and all that kind of stuff in Larian, and I found it really cool, so I decided to apply for it. And with my application, I I created a very overly the top CV. I knew that they were D&D based, so I decided that I'd create a character sheet as my CV. You don't need to do this. I'll get into that later. But I was like, yeah, I really want to get into this place. So I went all out for it. And I guess it ended up working out. I got the day after an offer to do a cinematic test, which you saw earlier, which I classic me finished around about an hour before the deadline. But hey, I guess you guys might not be a stranger to that. And I got my first interview offer about a couple weeks later. And so I did my first interview with Larian. I went over to the family office, and it turned out good. I'll talk about a lot of stuff involving interviews later as well. But I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. It felt like it was a good interview. And they were like, yeah, depending on how it goes, expect a reply about a week later. So a week later, I got nothing. 1 week turned into 2 weeks. 2 weeks turned into 2 months. And it wasn't until 6 months after the interview, and I did send follow-ups in the interim as well, that I actually got a reply back from Larian being like, hey, want to do a second interview? And I was like, yeah, cool, thanks, that'd be great. So I did. And thankfully so, because between the first interview and the second, I applied to a lot more places as well, hoping to get into the industry in general, just to get my foot in the door, and then got rejected from all of them. So Larian came in clutch, and I got hired pretty much the next day after. So that's when I started my career as a cinematic artist, starting off as a junior on a 6-month contract. So now that we've established how I got here, what's my day-to-day look like? So this might be some like different between studios, but I guess most of it you can kind of expect when you get into the game industry. So my tasks are usually split into 3 different categories. You got cinematic work, got collaboration, and meetings and reviews. So cinematic work. What's involved in me as a cinematic artist? 80% of the work I do in Larian is cinematic work, and that also means 80% of the time I stare at that thing over there, the timeline editor. That's not ours. We have our own proprietary one. That's Unreal Sequencer, but close enough, right? But this is what I look at for the vast majority of my time working. And involved in cinematic work, we got all this stuff here. So you got staging, timing, animations, cameras, and after that, we can talk about those stuff later. But essentially, for cinematic work, we got staging, which is placing your characters in positions in the stage to kind of see like where everything is in relation to the environment. You got timing, so you got VO that needs to be timed so that they all flow into each other all seamlessly, and with timing that also relates to visual storytelling. And you got animations that's provided by the Cine Anim team and also sometimes the gameplay team that give us really nice high fidelity animations that we can play around with and that we can jot in and all that kind of cool stuff. And then of course our main potatoes for skill set is the cameras, which is making things look pretty. Or at least highlighting the assets of others to make a cool cinematic sequence. So after you finish all of that, you go into the what is that? You go into reviews, and with the reviews, you send them off to the leads. And because of that, we end up receiving feedback from the leads, telling us how we can improve on our cinematics. And I have no idea. Oh, it's gone now. Good. I'll answer it. I appreciate it. No worries. Sorry about that. Anyway, reviews. Yeah, you finish a cinematic sequence, a scene, and then you send it up to review for the leads. And the leads come back and tell you, here's some things that you did that are cool, and here's some things that you can improve on. And then you go over all of them, and if there's any questions, you go up to the leads and you ask, what the fuck do you mean? No, but like you ask them to clarify certain things and to make sure that you understand what you're going to be doing to improve on the scene depending on the feedback. And usually the feedback is pretty solid, like makes sense, all that kind of stuff, and it's always really handy to get a second pair of eyes, especially if it's someone who has a lot more experience and is better than you in what you do. So applying feedback and addressing feedback is very important. And then during all of this, we also go and test the scene out in-game to make sure that it all works and to make sure that no bugs appear. And maybe some things will look cooler in timeline and then in-game it just doesn't really translate. So we kind of make something that kind of fits with context, because when in game you're actually playing the game and it goes into the cinematic and then you come out of the cinematic. Sometimes when you're working just in timeline, you don't have the context of gameplay, so you need to take that into account when you're actually making the cutscene itself. So that's why we go through iterations depending on what happens. So the next one, my day-to-day with collaboration. So this is like one part of the 20%. We have this thing called scene kickoffs. So for certain scenes, it's very simple. You just have two people standing, and then they kind of just talk to each other. That's fine. Usually for that, we kind of just go off do our own thing, and it's all Gucci. But after that, we have scene kickoffs, which are the more complex, bigger scenes that require multiple departments to come in and actually contribute. So you got the writing team, sound, scripting, VFX, animation, some other teams that are surely involved in it, and then it's your job as a cinematic artist to spearhead it and to pretty much present what is existing that the writing team and all created, and say this is what the scene is about, here's the context, here's the ideas that I proposed, and here's the animations and all that kind of stuff that's needed. And then after that, you ask if it's even possible, like if the VFX, if you're like pitching a cool VFX with a VFX team, you're like, I think this will work really well in the scene. Is it possible? Like, what's the feasibility of it? And they're like, you're crazy. Let's do something else. Or they can be like, that's really cool. Let's go ahead with it. So it's to gauge the amount of feasibility that you can put into the scene to make things work while still keeping everyone on the same page and making things just work out for all departments so that everybody's happy most of the time. A lot of the cross-department communications that I do involve a lot of the city animation work. We work very closely with them because they are animating the characters that we are essentially making the scene out of. So very, very important skill to have there. And then with feedback, again, feedback with the leads, as I mentioned before, but also the peers. Literally people right beside me. I go ahead and make a scene and I'm like, hey, person X beside me, what do you think of the scene? And they're like, I think you could fix this, this, and this. And then I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I won't take all the feedback, but I'll take the ones that are relevant and make sense to me, and then I'll apply it. It's very, again, feedback, a recurring theme here is very important, just in general. It helps make the product better. So, last bit of it is the meetings and reviews. So these are just, your scrums, your stand-ups that catch people up at the start of most days, the individual meetings that you have with, like, say, an animator. If I talk to an animator, you just say, like, hey, I think this animation is cool, but I think we can do this with it, and then they can add on top of it, or they can talk to me about reducing it, and all that kind of stuff. Just very specific meetings. And then you have the reviews and checks. So if animation comes back to me with an animation, and I'm like, this is really cool, but I think we can fix this, and then you just review that and make sure everything is kind of going in the right direction. So that's involved as well, and also making sure that any writing team or scripting team does is not like affecting the scene in a negative way. We want to make sure that happens as well. So tips and tricks. This is probably the real meat and potatoes that this presentation is about, the talk is about, because it relates a lot to you guys and what you can do to give you a better chance of getting into the industry. Now, this one, pay very close attention, and I encourage, if you want to as well, to just take photos of the screen. This will be a lot of information that you may or may not remember, so write something down, take out your phone, take a photo of it, and yeah, let's rock. So, CV. Also, before I say any of this, I just want to preface by saying I contacted, my leads, my lead recruiters, and all that, just to get their input on this. So it's not just me spouting bullshit. So let's start off with the CV. Don't overload them. Make sure your CV is catered to the job and role that you want to apply for. Okay. The overarching narrative of this, or like point that I want to get through, is that these recruiters or whoever is reviewing your CVs and your portfolios, they don't have a lot of time. They're very busy people, and you got to make sure that they can get through your stuff and see like the cool bits and all the relevant stuff in a very, very quick, short amount of time. Like, imagine reviewing like a CV like 30 seconds. What can you see in 30 seconds? What stands out to you? There's no point in having 2 pages and not being able to go through like 3/4 of it, right? So make sure that you cater, and then that you put the most important information at the top, have a very clear format on what you put down, and then just put in relevant experience. So this means, right, relevant experience, things that relate to the job that you're applying for. Uh, so if you want to apply for a game design job, then you want to put down things that apply to game design. You don't want to put down your time working as a baker for 6 months because that's not relevant. You can expand on that later if you want to, but again, they have very limited amount of time, so it's not best to just put stuff down just to fill it up, right? The next one is the format, and then you don't need to be super fancy like I was with my CV, because that was just like over the top. I was just excited for it. I mean, you can if you want to, but it's not necessary. The biggest factor of it is just make it nice and clear and concise. And with stuff like this, especially in the game industry, a lot of the emphasis will be with your portfolio and seeing the work that you've done in the past and kind of judging you based on that. Because you can put all this stuff down in the CV if you want, but it's all really going to come down to the work that you've done. So I asked my lead recruiter, like what he thinks would be a good example of a CV for newly grads, and he pointed me to this one. I've blurred out the name, but you can see there how there is two columns: the skill set on the left and the experience on the right. So the reason why the experience column is so small is because it doesn't have like as people who newly graduated college, you don't have a lot of industry experience, so you don't have a lot of stuff to put down. So what you can do instead is go through all the projects that you made during the class or during the year, during the course, and just put down a bunch of the skill sets that you've learned and that you like are proficient in, and just make sure that that gets displayed very, very clearly on the page. Don't worry too much about experience or education, all that kind of stuff. Experience will come down like over the line or over the years. So next is your cover letter. So with this one, your cover letter should complement the CV, right? It should not be. Don't make your cover letter your pitch about yourself. I'd say like you can have a section of that in there, but don't make that the majority of the cover letter because your CV should have already done that. You know, so the cover letter should complement your CV in the sense that it fills in the gaps that you think might need clarification on in your CV, and it should put in like your motivations and why you wanted to get into that studio or apply for that job. I think that's very important for the studio to know about your your reason for applying. Right? Do you want to be there to make cool cinematics? Do you want to be there for sustainability in the future? Do you want to be there, because you've always dreamt of being in games and want to do all this kind of stuff as a career? That kind of stuff. List that down and make sure it's again short. 3 short paragraphs should be okay. Again, how long is a piece of string? It kind of depends on you. But as long as it's short and concise to the point, you're good. So, yeah, your motivations there, what you wanted, and all that kind of stuff. And be authentic. You can spot bullshit. Be authentic with what you guys put down, and be authentic with how you come across. Just speak from your true experience, because there's no point putting something down that's not true. I think that's just common sense though. So now, your portfolio. Cater, cater, cater. This is probably one of your most important aspects to applications. So you want to make sure that your portfolio is catering to exactly the thing that you want to apply to, because there's no point in being an artist wanting to apply to a job with a load of art as a program. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So make sure you do that and always prioritize quality over quantity. Again, going back to the fact that they don't have much time to look at these things. So you want to make your videos, like your first 30 seconds really pop. Make sure you get all the important information at the top or at the start. And if you're using files like art and all that kind of stuff, put it at the very top so they can see it first. And for junior roles and interns and all the starting roles, they're really all looking for potential. You don't need to be super talented, senior level master artist Picasso. You don't need to be crazy when you're just starting out. They just need to make sure that you can improve on what you already have. You have a good standard that you can start with, that they can build you up, and they need to know that you can also work very well in a team. So having all that, don't stress too much about like having great art. Having great art helps a lot, but don't make that your entire thing because there are other aspects that are just as important as well. No passwords. This one is surprising to some maybe, but after talking to my leads and to my recruiters as well, it is very, very important that they can access your files and your portfolios very quickly and easily because, again, no time. So if they see a password, they need to get in. If they can't find that password or they have some kind of roadblock there, then you may not even be seen in the first place. So make sure it's just easy to access your portfolio and they can see it as quick as possible. And the next one is very important. Record your progress and your process. A lot of companies and a lot of recruiters, leads, and directors and all that who are looking at these kind of things, they want to see your process. They want to see how you think. They want to see how your step one to step whatever in making something is, because they want to know if you fit in the role that they're looking for, and they want to make sure that you are a good fit for the company essentially. And also like recording on your process also promotes self-awareness, which I'll talk about later. But being self-aware about like how you do things and yeah, all the methods that go around it is very important. So this is specifically for cinematics, but again, a lot of this can apply for other places as well. But just know that you don't need to use a specific software. You don't need to be like, I gotta get good at Unreal Engine because Unreal is, the standard. I mean, you can do that if you want to, but as long as you have some kind of technical proficiency, it's all good. Like we had a cinematic test that we had to do, again, that you saw earlier. I did mine in Unity. Other people did theirs in Unreal, others in Maya, others with just storyboards. There was one guy who came in before me, in the batch before me, about 6 months, I guess, like before I did. He made his Larian cinematic test in a custom battlefield server with his friends. That guy is now my lead. So, you can really go about it however way you want. Just make sure that it's of the highest quality that you can make. And yeah, just use your best. Use your best stuff. And for cinematics specifically, we value a lot of composition, editing, drama for new juniors. Again, you don't need to be crazy good with many things. Just know the basics. Know what you're getting into. And for anyone learning cinematics, Studio Binder has saved me a lot of times with this kind of stuff. Though, funnily enough, like when I was applying for Larian, I had no idea about the 180 rule. So the 180 rule, actually, so there's two subjects here, right? And the 180 rule divides the subjects in two, with the cameras on one side only. So you can't have them crossing. I'll just show that on this side as well. So the camera should only be in one side of the 180. I didn't know about this. So if you go back to my cinematic test, I actually ended up having the camera switch per shot because I thought that looked intriguing. But I broke a very fundamental rule in cinematics. And that's something that I learned very quickly in my first couple of weeks in Larian. So I fixed that up real quick, and yeah, just learning the basics of cinematics, cinematography, and all that kind of stuff through YouTube videos. You don't need to go to a master class or anything like that. It helps, but you can find a lot of these things on YouTube, and just like from learning from people who are better than you. And always be prepared to explain your thoughts, process behind a shot idea. This is something that is recurring for not just cinematics, but for everything like around cinematics. Just be able to explain your process. Again, that's why I mentioned earlier as well to record your process and your progress because they will be asking these kind of things. And then it's also very important for you to know how you're going about things so that you can improve upon them. And yeah, be prepared for feedback and iteration in the future because this is a very big part of Larian specifically, but I'm sure other companies as well. You get a lot of feedback and you're going to have to iterate on stuff. So when you're making something, just keep that in the back of your head where it might not be the final product. Some stuff might change, some stuff might stay the same. Don't get too married to the idea. Be open to feedback, be open to change, learn from your mistakes or the feedback you get in the past, and just strive to improve cinematics or your feel as you go. But it's a very big part of Larian. So if you guys want to apply it to us or for us, then keep that in mind. Now, bonus tip for the portfolio. This is something that our lead recruiter talked to me about, and it's replicate. Just give me a second. So try to do this exercise where you replicate something that's existing in a game or in a movie or something, and do your best to make that with whatever assets you can find online or you can make or however way you can get your hands on it, right? So for cinematics, for example, make a really cool cinematic scene that, I don't know, you look at Blizzard or you look at any of the World of Warcraft stuff and you're like, that's a cool cinematic, I want to make that. And then you go to Unity, you get your scuffed, like mix-up animations, get whatever cel-shaded character you can get in the Unity asset store, and just start making stuff to replicate that exact thing. Or like, there's this cool story about the UI UX designer that I found out through my lead recruiter, who made who replicated the UI of Dragon's Dogma, and the lead recruiter who knew her saw that, reposted it on LinkedIn, and she got the job offer. So it's very like replicating things of certain things that you like shows that you can make that thing to that standard, if that makes sense. And it shows that you have a very catered style to the studio or game that you're applying to join or make. And I think it's just like a really nice exercise to get a hang of how the process of making these things are. So like, again, for art, if you want to apply to League of Legends Riot department, which I actually wanted to at a certain point, if you wanted the concept art for them, go ahead and make some of your own concepts like that. Just replicate and like do some stuff that already exists to kind of get your hang of things. So, interviews. Self-awareness is a big one. Self-awareness, being able to, again, as I mentioned before, look back and in retrospect, just think about your experiences, talk about your good projects you've had, everything high, low, anything in between. It's very, very important that you get the hang and you know like how these processes are being made, because you are going to be asked that in the interview, and you are also going to be asked that in the studio itself for certain things. And in reality, uh, interviews is a vibe check, right? It's just making sure that you fit into the studio, that you fit into the culture, that your skill set and how you approach things, your processes, are at a standard that is good enough for that studio. It's different for every studios, but it needs to be at a certain standard first, right? And again, that comes down to self-awareness. So my lead recruiter told me to tell you guys that maybe like a couple days before the interview, just get a piece of paper and just write down a whole bunch of stuff in your past 4 or so years of experience in the course, just to talk about like to yourself, what you went through, what your stand-up projects were, what went wrong, all the stuff that failed and how you ended up making it not fail or succeed, and all the other experiences in between. Just everything, really. Just jot it down on a piece of paper so that you have it to talk about and reference. And get ready to explain things along, because that's going to happen. But yeah, now, how do you get ready? So this is a quote that a lecturer here and also an ex-writer at Larian told me when she presented her stuff when I was still in college. It's luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And it stuck around with me for, well, like 6, 7 years now. So it's definitely been a very big, like, oh my God, yeah, moment. So yeah, luck is when the preparation meets opportunity. So how do you prepare? Actually, before I get to that part, I want to talk a bit more about this, because I feel like knowing the idea that goes behind this quote is really going to help you guys. So preparation. So actually, let's forget about preparation for a sec. Opportunity. You find a studio that you like to work for. Say, I don't know, Larian. Let's say Larian opens up spots to their Dublin offices looking for juniors and interns. And you want to go at it. You want to apply. But you don't have anything to show. So the opportunity is there, but you have nothing prepared for it. So the opportunity is gone. Might as well not be there. But then when you have preparation and you don't have opportunity, all you have to do is wait. And as long as you're active in trying to find the opportunity, it will come. Trust me, it will come at some point. Um, and actually, with no, okay, I can talk about that later. I'm gonna save you guys on a cliffhanger here. But how do you prepare for that opportunity? So first one is to develop team skills. Learn how to give and receive feedback. So I like to go with constructive feedback in the sandwich method. So you start with the bun, have the meat, and then have the lower bun patty. I don't know. What is it? Like two buns, right? So the first bun is your positive feedback. So it's the stuff that they got right. So let's say an animator comes to me with an animation to review. I'm like, yeah, I think I really like how you did this thing in that animation. And then you go to the middle part, which is your patty, which is the negative part, right? But it's negative in a constructive way. So like, I really like how you did this cool thing, but I think we can improve on what you did here by doing this, this, and that. And then you leave off with another positive reinforcement, which is, but I think you're going in the right direction. So, yeah, keep it up. That kind of thing, right? So you're not just being an asshole and being like, I think this is shit, and leave it at that. That's very non-constructive criticism or feedback. You want to make sure that they know what they're doing wrong, they know how to fix it, and that they are encouraged to keep going with what they are doing right. And experience a team environment as much as possible. Because I feel like a lot of this is just theory until you actually put it into work and practice. And that can be done through projects like you guys are doing, or through game jams, or any kind of project that involves teams. Because I feel like team experience is very important in the game industry. Um, for you guys who play like Valorant or League or whatever kind of competitive um, game there are right now, you can't solo queue the game industry. You're not going to have a good time if you try to do that. So working in a team environment is very important to know. So next thing is to hone your craft. How do you do that? Create, create, create. The more you create, the better you get. I think that's pretty obvious, but it's easier said than done, right? But you gotta make sure that you create things to improve your skills at what you're creating and to get feedback with what you create to improve it even better. Because I mentioned earlier, two pair of eyes are better than one. Sometimes when you're working on something and you're only consulting yourself, you can get tunnel vision, and then you can't see the things that are wrong with what you're doing because you don't have another reference for it. So that you can go ask someone who is much better than you for feedback, or you can go online to see like tutorials on that kind of stuff. But honestly, getting feedback is a real lifesaver and it helps a lot. But make sure you create as much as you can. This means like making more games if you want to be a game designer, making more art for an artist, making more cinematics, you get it. And be a lifetime student. You're constantly learning. I've been 4.5 years in this industry, making the cinematics that you saw earlier, and I still am learning a lot of things about cinematography and cinematic in general that I never knew before, just from people who have been in the industry longer than me, or just like, maybe a junior comes up and has a scene and does like a cool camera shot that I really like but never thought of. There you go, I learned from a junior. It doesn't have to always be someone who is much better than you or has been more experienced than you in the game industry. So just be open to all sorts of ideas, open to feedback, and just keep learning. And learn to be uncomfortable in situations. And this means just challenge yourself and be out of your comfort zone. I know, like, you probably heard this a million times from YouTube or whatever videos or people. Just challenge yourself to make good things, because if you don't, that's just going to be a recipe for stagnation. You don't want to stagnate. You want to keep learning and improving. So how do you prepare for networking? Also, before I go into that, this is you can see me over there, and we are with the voice actors for Will and Lazel, Deborah and Thea. They're really cool, by the way. They're super cool. Um, but yeah, your mindset in an interview should change. You should, so not an interview, networking. You should go into networking with the mindset of building relationships, not to get a job. Okay. And I know it seems kind of backwards because you're like, I need to network to get a job, obviously. But people can spot you and can smell you just wanting to get a job off them and nothing else from a mile away, right? You're not going in there to take advantage of people. You're going in there to make connections with people in the industry, especially in something that's so small and tight-knit as the game industry. People know each other, And if you're going in there with the mindset to just take advantage of people, other people will know that too. Um, so you want to go in there with the mindset to connect, because somewhere down the line, that one guy you talked at and made friends with in that one very niche con or event might come back to you like 3, 4 years down the line and be like, I remember that guy. I'm going to contact him and recruit him for something else. You know, it all comes around. So sometimes you got to be patient with it, but go in there to make connections. Next one is to cater events to you, right? You want to do events that cater to the role that you want to do. More often than not, obviously you can go to whatever events you want to, but say you want to go into art, so you want to go to some art meets or to I don't know, maybe even do cons, artist alleys in cons. So you meet a lot of cool artists there, and you make a lot of connections there too. So it's that kind of thing. And don't just focus on getting your foot in the door for big studios, because there are a lot of cool indie studios as well that may need your expertise. I mean, I guess technically Larian was an indie studio. Technically they still are, but they were an indie studio when I applied, and look at them now. So don't disregard them. Just apply to whatever you can find that suits what you're trying to go for, and don't be afraid to connect. There are times when you add people on LinkedIn, but you don't want to send them a message. But there's no harm to it, right? Just don't be annoying. Please. Don't like spam other people, being like, "I want a job, give me a job," blah blah blah. Just go in there, try to connect with people through whatever means that you find is comfortable. But don't be afraid to just send it to them. If you've been pondering about it, just this is your sign to go for it. Um, and now we go into some self-reflection stuff. This is more about me, so you can put your phones down if you want to. But this is more like my experience in the game industry and how I found it over the past 4.5 years. This is a cool team photo that we shot at the top of Ballast House just before the launch of BT3. This was when we were about to go to our um, launch party. It was pretty cool. So my experience is, yeah, it's been pretty come true, honestly. Always dreamt of being in the game industry. Never thought I'd be here making games when I was still in secondary school. As I said before, I wanted to be like Finger and be an esports athlete. But things turned out differently, and I'm glad that I'm here, and I'm glad that things turned out the way they did. And it's been a really eye-opening and self-discovery growth moment in my life. So it's pretty nice. And one thing I learned is, I guess with everything in life, communication is key. There was one time where I messed up in the studio, where I was working on a really big scene, but because the scene was being worked on for multiple months, so it's a really kind of long and staggered scene, I messed up and didn't tell gameplay about a certain thing that we did, which came back to bite me in the ass, because when we finished the scene, gameplay was like, hey, what's going on here? Like, why is this happening? And so that required like 1 to 2 weeks of just grinding out a solution for it, because I didn't, or I messed the communication that I needed to relay to gameplay. So make sure that you communicate everything that is needed to be communicated, and keep a record so that people can come back to it and just um, reference, because some of these projects can take so long to make that people end up forgetting the things that we were supposed to do on them. So having that kind of reference point is very crucial, very very important to keep in mind. And keeping a nice work-life balance. Like, I know a lot of you are probably similar to me in the regard that we're all very passionate about the things that we do. You're in games, you're here to have fun, you're here to enjoy, and then you're making something that you're going to be proud of. But that also means that you have a tendency, or at least speaking for myself here, I have the tendency to overwork, because I want to make something really cool. So I end up just working like 10 hours or something when I don't need to, or just neglecting certain parts of my life because I'm like, I want to get this scene out when I didn't need to. Our Larian is very cool in the sense that they value your time and your life, to the point that they will like send you home if you're working too much. Um, but you got to keep that in mind when you're doing these things. Limit the all-nighters. I understand sometimes you have to do all-nighters, to get something across, but just keep it level. Work-life balance is very important. You gotta prioritize your relationships as well as your work, but work doesn't always come first. There are other things much more important. And this is one of the first things when I joined Larian. It was like the first week and first month, and they decided to Photoshop my face onto this guy from Kill Bill. I think it's Pyman. I don't know, but I liked it, so it became an emote in the Larian Slack channel. It's called Kris the Wise. Uh, but some words of wisdom for you guys to part with. Don't give up. When I mentioned earlier that it's very hard to get into the game industry, I'm not joking. It's very hard to get into the game industry. It's not as easy as going to Costa, being like, here's my CV, hire me as a barista. You know, you have a lot of skills that you have to build up. There's a lot of hurdles you have to go through to overcome. There is a lot of rejection that you have to face. It's all part of the process, and then eventually, as long as you keep going, you will get somewhere. Accept failure. As I mentioned earlier, with the my big mess up, it comes. It's a part of the process, as with everything. But failure is a very good opportunity to go and learn something that you might not have otherwise. Failure is it shouldn't be like the end all be all. You fail at something, you're feeling kind of shit about yourself, but you have to get up from that and then learn from your mistakes, and then to try use that failure to motivate improvement for the future. Um, this was one of my failures right here. I don't know if you guys remember this bug, but this was in early access at BG3. I missed a look at key somewhere in the timeline. It was like hidden or so, but that created a bug that now has over 1 million views on YouTube. So I look back at it now fondly. It's pretty funny, especially when she says, "We won't always be watching," and proceeds to always be watching. Uh, but it's something to look back on, and it's fun. But that is a failure. Take it in stride. Move on. Keep an open mind. I mentioned earlier that I wanted to work for Riot Games as an illustrator, so I'll go into that a little bit more now. Before I wanted to move into Larian, before I applied, I initially wanted to be an illustrator or concept artist for League of Legends and Riot Games because one of my art heroes, Keenan Lafferty, if any of you don't know him, worked in Riot Games, and I was like, that's really cool. I like League. I want to work for Riot Games. But I ended up in Larian instead. I initially applied to uh, use it as a stepping stone so that I can improve my art in the meantime while also having my foot in the door. But 4.5 years passed, and I actually enjoy cinematics much more than I enjoy drawing now. So things can change. You don't have to stick to this one thing that you want for the rest of your life. Be open to changes. Be open to new experiences. And who knows? Maybe you'll end up like me and want a different career, or end up enjoying something different that you never even thought of. Like I enjoyed video editing back when I was like in teenage years. But I never thought about, cutscenes for games. That's like an entire different territory that completely was not in my mind. And when you're making projects, when you're making things, I always find it best to start big and then scale back down than to start small and just kind of inch forward. Because when you start big, you start getting all the cool ideas. You're not limited to, I have to do this because it isn't, all that kind of stuff. You're not limiting yourself. And it's what I do for scenes as well. I start off really big with the ideas, and then I scale it back down if my lead tells me that I'm being too ambitious or that I'm being too crazy. Um, but it allows me to experiment with all sorts of ideas, all sorts of ways to go about something. And it really just clears the board. It puts everything on the table so you can look at it all and then decide which one's best. Instead of just starting small and just having a limited um, amount of things to pick from. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Next is you really get out what you put in. This is very important because a lot of people kind of come into like tell me, do I really need college? Do I really need to work to get to the game industry? Do I really need to do this, and that? And the reality of it is that college is useless if you don't put your effort. You get out of it. in college or like anything else, what you put in, and it really reflects on like what you've done. So be sure to just do your best, try your hardest because that will help you in the long run. Because yeah, it matters. And lastly, enjoy the process and have fun because you're here to make games, play games, experience games, and just just have fun doing it. Yeah, Q&A. Thank you for your time. Yes.
Have you ever had like prior experience with cinematic, creating cinematics before in life?
Nope. I had the only real cinematic experience I had was video editing. I didn't know how to use a camera. I didn't know any cinematography. Didn't know nothing. But the only thing I did know was how to edit videos because I started like making stick figure animations and putting up on YouTube when I was like at a young age. If any of you guys know, I used to do embarrassing looking back at it now. I used to do anime music videos and edit those and put them online. And actually, I put one of the ones that I was really proud of in my portfolio. And then one of the people interviewing me that day was like, "Hey, I saw the AV," and I was like, "Oh." But to think of it, it's like, "Hey, you like your lay in April?" I'm like, "Yeah," and we just talked about that. So it's really cool. But yeah, no cinematic experience beforehand. I pretty much just learned things on the go as I was applying for Larian. But I did have my editing experience to kind of back me up on that regard. So there you go.
We'll say that like it's more than applying for maybe like a position that you're not sure you might be able to do, like since you didn't have that experience like cinematics, etc. It'd be like just whatever you can find, like open up the you can find.
If you can do it, if you know that you can put the work in for it, right? So say you're applying for an art role, but you don't have any experience in art. You still need to get to a certain standard with art to be able to be recognized for that role. So you got to put in the work to get the opportunity to be an artist in a studio. That makes sense? Yeah, okay. Cool. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
What programs would be go to a person from school?
Unreal is pretty good. I think the Unreal Circuit is pretty nice for cinematics. So I recommend if you're doing cinematics, do stuff in Unreal. Uh, Unity is pretty good too. I mean, that's the one I did it on, but it's okay. But definitely learn how to use Unreal, and if you want, editing is also a very important part of cinematics. So try edit some videos in like Premiere or After Effects or Vegas Pro or something like that, just to get experience in that department. But yeah, just software wise, learn Unreal. Unreal is like pretty much an industry standard at this point. So yeah, I'll bounce it. Always. Anyone else? Yes. And what, sorry?
Say, take notes on
Take notes.
take notes on
Oh, I got you. Yeah. So when you're working your way through the course, take notes of how you do certain processes. So you're always kind of reflecting back on what you did so that you can look back at it and try to improve on it. So for example, let's take CloudTrail for a second, which is the final year project that we did. So in that one, what I would do is just to take notes on how I was like the programmer and also the artist for it. So I take notes on how I went about making the art, how I went about making the programming, what went wrong when I did those things, how I collaborated with my teammates, how I ended up making something that works that I never expected to work. All those like sudden changes as well could also help. And just generally take notes on things to look back on so that you have something to reference. Because after some time passes, you'll forget a lot of the experiences that you've had making something. And when you're asked in an interview, being like, what are your strengths, or like what happened in a project that you found difficult, you're gonna be like, oh, I don't know, it's just like, yeah, this one. So having notes to think back on and to reference will really help in that kind of thing. Sorry? Anything. Anything that you want. You can put it down into Google Docs, put it down into a copy. Anything that you can take notes on. I personally would have it just in in one copy, because I can only take so much like space for a game before moving on to the next, so I don't need another copy for that, right? So yeah, hope that answered. Cheers. Yes.
In terms of a portfolio, would you suggest having like a website or even like a PDF that would have like attached videos or links, please?
A website is what I used. Website's good. A PDF is also good. It depends on what you do. Um, if you're doing stuff that involves videos, highly suggest a website, because it's easier, again, for the recruiters to kind of just click on it and then go for it. For a PDF, if you're doing like asset stuff or the asset, like UI stuff or stuff that requires a lot of documentation, sure, that works for it. It kind of like it all depends on the role that you're trying to go for, right? But website is generally a solid choice. Anyone else? Yes. Just in general, or um, so what would usually would happen is the writers would make up a scenario, they'd put it into a file, and then we'd take it over as cinematics, and then we'd read over it. And so with BG3, there wasn't a huge amount of collaboration with like at the start, but there was during it when I was asked to like clarify, or I asked them to like clarify some stuff for certain things. But for certain scenes where we did get involved at the start of the writing process, they would usually pitch ideas. They would like give ideas of what they wanted, and then I would be like, I think that's cool. I think that's feasible. Like, I think yeah, we should go for it. Or I think this is like way too over the top. We don't have the things to handle this, or like any of that kind of stuff. And then we'd like try to find a middle ground. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, that's cool. Anyone else? Yes. I've been upset with cinematics for a while. Yeah, just because I haven't run out of fuel for it yet. Yet. Probably at some point, because like for me personally, I believe that um, experience and being able to just experience different things is a valuable part of life. So for me, like being in cinematics for like 50 years or something is like, I don't want to do the same thing for 50 years, right? Right, but maybe going to another studio doing cinematics there would be different enough to where I kind of get that refreshment. So that'd be cool. But for now, yeah, cinematics for a while. That's it. Oh. Yes. For a portfolio. Okay. Um, any kind of experience with games that you put in? Like, I assume you guys are making a lot of projects right now, so put that stuff in your portfolio. And any like stuff outside of college as well that you work on, personal projects, put that in your portfolio as well. And I kind of, as I mentioned, for juniors and interns and for starting roles, we are looking for potential. And in order for you to up that potential of yours, just create more stuff to put into your portfolio. And the more stuff you make, the higher level the quality is going to be. So eventually you will reach a standard. I can't say specifically what the standard is because it's different per studio. But the standard has to be like relatively not high, but it needs to be there for them to see the potential for you to improve that and keep that going, like in the company. Like you need to start at a pretty decent base still, but you can work up to that with doing your own personal stuff too. So yeah, I hope it's good. Or do you need clarification? All good. All right. Yes.
My question is just the moment that college finishes.
Yeah.
The distance between when you finish college and get the job.
Hmm.
What do you recommend, or what did you do once college finished? Like, were you still in touch with classmates to continue making projects? Were you just spending time to build your portfolio, as well as like, was there a quota of how many jobs you're reaching out to and applying for? Like, is it 50 a day, or what the kind of what the lifestyle after college sort of down?
Lifestyle after college is rough. But you can get there. It's just a bit hard. So what I did personally was, at the start, I didn't really know what I wanted. I knew I wanted illustration, I knew I wanted art, and I applied to cinematics and Larian, but of course I had that period where like I didn't have a response from it. So what I ended up actually doing was making an entirely new portfolio of UI and UX design because I was interested in that too. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna make this thing, and I made a game called Hacker Clicker. It's literally just a clicking simulator game, like Cookie Clicker. But it was a way for me that I thought would flex my UI skills and to learn a lot of what goes into UI making. Again, going back to the whole thing of replication, right? I'm essentially replicating Cookie Clicker by making a game. And with that, I applied to a studio over in Belfast called Italic Pig, and I actually ended up getting an interview. So that worked. But of course, I guess I wasn't up to standard, or something else went awry, but I wasn't able to cash it in. But Larian is much better than anything. No, good. But I got to Larian, so I was happy enough with that. But I applied to at least a couple studios a week. Some of them I'd get rejection letters from, some of them I won't even hear from at all. It's just kind of part of the process. But just keep trying every week, look for opportunities, keep new things. Networking is good as well, like go just to game dev meetups and all that kind of stuff. You never knew who you're gonna find. There was one time where I went to a Christmas game dev meetup, I think during that year, and I was just there to look at a friend's game because I thought it was cool, and then I just chatted up. I ended up chatting with this one guy who was like, "Yeah, we did concept art for a game we're trying to make," and I was like, "I did concept art. You want to talk about it?" And then we just ended up talking about that, and then he was making a game about, I can't remember. It was like a faster than light kind of game, but the ship they needed some kind of concept for, and I was like, yeah. So they ended up hiring me just out of a random meet at a game dev meet because we like games. And then I did concept art for them, and I got my experience like that, just through that kind of means. That makes sense, yeah. So yeah, I hope that cool. No problem. No one else. Yes.
What about you? What do you think is the best way to connect with Discord server?
Best way to connect? I don't know if there is a best way. Just to kind of have numerous ways to go about it. So Discord service can work if you're making a game jam or something, or making a small game with people. But meeting people in person, just hanging out, chatting, becoming friends, is a pretty good way to go as well. I'm going to mention game dev meetups or artist alleys I mentioned earlier. I want to say GDC, but you're also spending $3,000 on something that might not get you anywhere. I wouldn't say that's worth it. You can, yeah, money, might. But just any way that you can find a way to talk to different people in the industry is pretty good already. So just have a look at local meets. I think those are the best ones so you can meet in person. Or attend game jams online with different people, because maybe you'll end up being in a team with someone in the industry who might end up giving you an opportunity later on. Just stuff like that. Oh, thank you. Anyone else? Yes. Programming. It's not my field, but um, just because it's not my field, I don't know much about it, but I encourage replication. Again, it's just seeing a cool system in a game, trying to replicate that in your own game. and just jotting down the process of how you went about it. I think that's a pretty solid step. Cool. Anyone else? Yes.
I like your a lot of, us, oh, why anyway, I think you
I wouldn't apply willy-nilly. So if you're applying to a place, make sure that you have something catered for that place. Because there's no use in applying for a programming job if all you've got are art stuff. They won't even recognize it. They won't even look, right? So apply with something backing you up, essentially. Oh, yes.
Sure. For CV format, I've heard advice that if you're going for an arts kind of job, it's okay to make your CV a bit more fancy and standardized. I just wondered if you reciprocate that advice with an art specific job. Should your CV kind of show off that mind?
You can if you want to. I think showing that you have an artsy or like showing that you have a CV that stands out in an artistic way, I think it's very beneficial as well. Like if you can afford to do that, because it makes your CV stand out, right? It makes it different from all the other just like black and white CVs that they get every single day. So yeah, if you wanna, I think that's cool. It's a bonus, not super necessary. Yeah. Cool. Anyone else?
pretty awesome. Before you apply to that, like when you apply to the other jobs that you get rejected, do you get any feedback on what you brought or what you said?
I think the only feedback I got was from accounting manager, and that was like out of all the different. I applied to USOL, I applied to EA, I applied to a bunch of stuff in the UK and Germany and all that. And I think the only one I got back was from you. And that was only them telling me, like, I think you are very well spoken and the interview went well, but sorry. Sometimes you're not going to get anything useful back. It's cool if you just want to follow up with them, being like, hey, do you have any feedback? Some of them might reciprocate, some of them don't, but there's no harm in putting it out. Yes.
This is kind of a general question. We don't want to put all our attention to sorry, in addition to texts that you made
Oh, yeah, especially if you apply to something like architecture, then yeah, it shows that you can work. It shows that you can be teachers. Yeah, beneficial stuff. Really. Yes. Anyone else? Yes.
Now that you have an established job, like a badass job, Larry, how much of your free time is dedicated still to refining your skills, or when you're off the clock, you have to be sure that you're not going to like try to burn out.
So this goes back to like work-life balance. A lot of my skills develop in the studio because it's where I do most of my work and I get most of my feedback from. But outside of work, occasionally I'll like edit a couple videos just because I like to edit. But other than that, I don't do a whole lot because I feel like as well if I'm like spending 8 hours a day making cinematics at work, and then I go back home and it's spend like another 4 hours making a cinematic at home. That will burn me out very quickly. Um, but it's not to say that you can't do it. Just like be wary of your limits so that you can watch out for burnout. Burnout that's rough, man. Like it is. I've experienced it. It's not nice. Not specifically with Larian, but like with other things like that I dedicated myself a bit too much to. Um, but yeah, just I learned most of my things at work.
Small games inside of work, not just that much. You don't even say that.
No, I would love to make another game for sure. Like there are game jams that my friends and I tried to organize. Some of them got squashed because of COVID. Some of them got just we did them, but there wasn't much. If that makes sense. But I would still love to go and make games. Ever since I did game design in college, I ended up just loving the process of making a game. And I think that's also a very key takeaway, very important takeaway here is that you should love the process. The quality of the outcome will come. Like, don't worry about the outcome. Don't worry about just wanting something to look at the end. Enjoy the process of making. But yeah, no. If I had an opportunity to go and like make another indie game, if I had the opportunity to rework Cloud Trail Islands, I definitely would. But yeah, go. I need. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
This is the last one.
Okay.
But it is my favorite question.
Yeah.
Do you have a story about like a nightmare day on the job? Maybe specifically with Baldur's Gate 3, where it was just the worst sequence of events that could have happened just to you.
It was. I think it was relating back to this one here. What I learned with communication is key. Keep a record to reference because that did come from an experience where I was like, you know, because I messed up so hard in not involving an entire department that they had to rework their stuff. Someone had to use an animation that they made. Thankfully, I didn't lose the scene that me and a bunch of other people worked on because of that. Like it was on the line, and there was just like a whole bunch of stuff that we needed to like meet in the middle with, and just try to fix in a short amount of time. It caused a lot of stress. It caused people to be like, "Oh shit, what are we gonna do?" kind of thing. A lot of people like there were Slack threads. So yeah, of people just being like, "We can do this, but we can't do that," and then people arguing back and forth, and I'm like, "Whatever." So certainly that just because I didn't involve another department in the key part of communication because stuff happens, right? But it's bouncing off that and bouncing from that and just like trying to make the best out of what you can is the important part of the story. Even though it was a very stressful time, but it always happens. Anyone else? You good? Itching? All right. Cool. Thank you guys.